What is that?
Today's video is about how the film Inside Out 2 was almost ruined by the character anxiety. In this sequel, we are reintroduced to our main character, Riley. And at this point, she is turning 13 and is about to enter high school and starting puberty. And because puberty is upon us, they introduce 4 new emotions: anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and my personal favorite, ennui, who is kind of just like boredom or lack of interest, what I would call like apathetic.
Orange? Who made the console orange?
It's not every day that I watch a film, especially a psychology-based film, and agree with everything that they did. But Pixar hit it out of the park with Inside Out 2. They take a graduate level understanding of emotional development and they distill it down for a younger audience as well as adults. And they really show us how our memories and beliefs form our sense of self.
I love that. And what was your name again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can get ahead.
These new emotions are important because when we enter our adolescent stage in life, we are developing, obviously, and that comes along with more complex emotions. We're gonna need more than joy or fear or anger to help us better navigate the world that we're in, right? We're gonna be more concerned with how other people are perceiving us. We suddenly become much more aware of self. I think we all can relate to the fact that when you're in your puberty, early teen years, you're acutely aware of your body and how it compares to other people. So it makes sense that we would introduce things like embarrassment and envy, right? Because it helps us better navigate the world we're in today. In the film, when this is happening, a demolition team comes in and completely wipes out the control center. And joy, obviously joy, sadness, all the basic emotions are terrified and overwhelmed and wonder what the heck is going on. Now they come in, they demolish, and these new emotions are introduced. And immediately, and I think this is a really key thing to think about when you think about anxiety, is the character anxiety introduces herself to all of the basic emotions by saying, I was so nervous to meet you, on brand, right? And then says, I was particularly nervous to meet you, Joy. And I want to pause there because it's a really key piece of information about how anxiety versus joy operate within our bodies and our brains. Anxiety, I think we could all agree, worries a lot, right? Generalized anxiety disorder is characterized by uncontrollable worry, and we worry about the future. We're very future focused, and we stress a lot. Joy, on the other hand, is present. Joy is excited about what's happening right now. We're feeling it. We're in it. So they're almost like the antithesis of each other. And I just love that they drew that attention to it through anxiety introducing herself and saying, I was particularly nervous to meet you, Joy, because essentially it's almost like meeting your opposite.
Orange? Who made the console orange?
Do I look orange?
I didn't touch it.
Orange is not my color.
Not me. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I am just such a huge fan of yours, and now here I am meeting you face to face. Okay, how can I help? I can take notes, get coffee, manage your calendar, walk your dog, carry your things, watch you sleep.
Wow, you have a lot of energy. Maybe you could just stay in one place?
Anything. Just call my name, and I'm here for you.
Okay, love that. And what was your name again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can get ahead of myself. I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions, and we are just super jazzed to be here. Where can I put my stuff?
After anxiety introduces herself, she moves quickly, as you would expect anxiety to. And in this quick movement, she essentially tries to take over the control center, which at first Joy is like, wait, what are you doing? Hey. And she shows her pieces of the control center that Joy never had access to. I think that's an important thing to remember. And when anxiety realizes that this is going to be a battle, that the different emotions aren't just going to let her come in and take over, she has embarrassment bottle up all of the basic emotions. And I think that's really important to just take a minute to acknowledge what anxiety is doing. For any of us who've experienced anxiety, when anxiety is running the show, nothing else matters. We often can't reason with ourselves. We don't feel any joy. We honestly can't feel any sadness. We don't even feel any fear or anger. Anxiety is the only thing we can experience, describe, and feel in the moment. And I think it's important to note that when anxiety tries to kick out our basic emotions, those primary emotions, she has embarrassment do it. Embarrassment bottles them up. And if you think about the dynamics of these emotions, right? If I'm anxious, if I'm worried about fitting in or doing things right, having everybody like me, it's because I don't want to be embarrassed. And so, of course, embarrassment is going to do the bidding of anxiety because it's like, okay, that will make sure that we're not embarrassed because she's already worried about making sure we fit in. Whew, we can relax. And so it puts them in the bottle and sends them to the vault. Another thing the character anxiety does is that it causes Riley to do things that she would not normally do, like break into the coach's office and try to look at her notebook where she takes notes of all the different hockey players and what she thinks about each and every one of them. Now, that's not really within Riley's character as we know her. And I think we can all agree that when we're in anxiety, when we're living in maybe an anxiety attack or anxiety is running the show in our life, we can say and do things that really aren't us. And I love that they demonstrated that because all of the basic emotions are like, no, she wouldn't do that. That's not our Riley. That's not something that she would do. And they made a point of repeating it over and over so that as the viewer, you recognize, hey, anxiety can make me do things that I don't want to do that actually aren't part of who I am. The character anxiety also does something very interesting inside Riley's brain. And I thought that this was a very important piece for us to acknowledge. And maybe part of the reason, as a therapist, I couldn't help but go there, part of the reason why as we get older, we lose our sense of imagination. And that's because when anxiety enters Riley's brain, she hijacks imagination land and turns it into the space where all of, I guess, I don't know what those characters really are, but I would just call them like worrywarts for lack of a better term. They come up with all of the possibilities and the ways in which things can go wrong for Riley. It's essentially her anxiety headquarters. And all of these characters are coming up with these worst case scenarios so we can quote unquote prepare for it. And that's just another way that anxiety ruins something that was completely lovely, healthy, and I would argue something that we should all maybe try to tap into more, a healthy imagination. The character anxiety causes all of this chaos, and as she gets deeper and deeper embedded into Riley's brain, a ton of things start to shift, and it all swirls and comes together in kind of like the perfect / most unhealthy storm when Riley has a panic attack at the hockey game. And as you're watching this, Pixar does a beautiful job of helping you feel like you're experiencing it with her. The sound goes down. You start to only hear a few things at a time. Noises in the background, voices and conversations get muffled. You can't understand what's being said. Her heart starts to race. You hear her heartbeat. Bum, 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 bum. Her breathing gets faster. You feel her become overwhelmed as she goes into the penalty box. And it made me cry, to be honest, watching her go through this. It felt so painful. Anxiety has gotten so out of control that she has created essentially this windstorm within headquarters, and none of the other emotions can even get to the control panel to change what's happening. And I think that was so powerful to me because I know that once we enter a panic attack, once that's happening, there isn't much we can do. All of the work that I do with patients and things I've talked about in my videos is about us doing the work up front or as we feel it building, right? As things start to kind of get muffled or we start to feel our palms get extra sweaty or our hearts start to race, that's the time when we can implement some of our coping skills. And so I really loved that depiction. I love the fact that, not that I loved that it was happening, but I love that anxiety was swirling and swirling and nobody could reach her. And Joy was the one that finally got in there and was able to stop her. But she couldn't stop her by poking buttons and changing things. She stopped her by trying to make eye contact and speak to her very slowly and clearly and with love and compassion. It was really beautiful. And when that's happening, remember we're jumping between headquarters and Riley. It jumps back to Riley sitting in the penalty box and she grounds herself. First, you see her notice the sound of the ice, people ice skating because they're playing hockey. and the puck and the sticks, you start to pick up these sounds. They become a little bit louder. Remember, they were muffled before. Then you see her hand reach out on the bench where she's sitting, and you see her take that in. And they sit on that scene for a little bit, so you can see her fingers touch the little pieces of the wood. And you realize, oh, she's grounding herself, trying to bring herself back. Then it cuts back up to her, and she's trying to get her breath back under control. And then she comes back, and her friends are there, and she's out of it. And I thought that was just a beautiful way to represent what needs to happen in order for us to pull ourselves out when we're already in it, right? Because anxiety's swirling in our head, and it's a storm. Essentially, none of our other emotions can get control. They can't take back over. We have to figure out a way to bring ourselves back. When Riley comes out of her panic attack and is able to ground herself and she's back, we cut into headquarters again. And we see something that's really powerful and really important to note, that once Joy is able to slowly let anxiety release controls, anxiety falls to the floor. And she's crying. And she says to Joy, I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to protect her. And I thought that was a really important piece to talk about here and to acknowledge, that we often want to think of our emotions as good or bad, right? I talk about this all the time, that we think like anger is bad and sadness is bad, but joy is good and, happiness is good. We have certain ideas or judgments about our emotions. However, all emotions are important. All emotions are good and should be included because they all serve a purpose. And in this case, anxiety's purpose was to protect Riley, to try to get her to fit in so that she could feel good about herself. She just went about it the wrong way because anxiety can't run the show alone. That's what we learned through this entire film, is that you can't have only one emotion running things. If we're always joyful all the time, I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but Joy kind of got on my nerves in both films because she's a little bit childlike, a little bit naive. And it's fine in the first film because Riley's very young, but you can see as she gets older how Joy running the show can embarrass her. It can make her look kind of silly in front of the older kids that she wants to fit in with. And we can't always see the world in rose-colored glasses, right? Bad things can happen. We might need to feel sad sometimes. We might not want to be embarrassed. We might see something in someone else that we want that makes us work harder. And that's part of envy, right? And so as we're navigating this, as we see anxiety fall to the floor and apologize, she feels really guilty for what she did. We recognize that each and every emotion plays an important role. And letting one run the control panel all the time isn't good for anybody. Inside Out 2 differs from Inside Out 1 because in Inside Out 1, if you don't remember, they talk about core memories and how these core memories form personality islands. Do you remember from headquarters when they look out and there are these beams connecting these islands to headquarters? And the islands are things like family and friends. I think they have Hockey Island. There's all these different islands. Now they show those again in Inside Out 2, but they're not as, I don't want to say important, but they're not discussed that much because the piece that they try to show us in Inside Out 2 is that as we get older, we develop a sense of self. And what they're demonstrating through Inside Out 2 is how our memories form our beliefs about ourselves. And then these beliefs about ourselves dictate who we think we are. So it goes memories to beliefs to sense of self. And in the show, this is represented by Joy or anxiety taking memories from the day. So they pick up those marbles and they go down in an elevator into a pond and they drop the marbles in and they shoot out these kind of lights or ribbons towards the sky. And when they strum those little ribbons, they give a message like, I'm not good enough, or I'm a good friend, or whatever the belief about that memory is. And when those things come together, they coalesce, all those little threads or ribbons from those memories come together back up in headquarters, it forms kind of like a funky looking tree. And that tree is Riley's sense of self. And this is really beautiful, and probably the part of the film that made me like cry the most, because all this time we're watching Riley struggle with anxiety, right? Anxiety is in control of all of her thoughts. No other emotions are getting any input, and things are getting really rough for her. Meanwhile, Joy and them are out looking in the back of her mind to find her old sense of self, which anxiety shot back there. Now, I want to pause here because I loved the representation of Joy and anxiety taking things that they didn't want Riley to think about or fixate on and shooting them to the back of their brain, what I would call in therapy repression. And so they're showing why we select certain memories or certain experiences, and we want to shoot them in the back of our brain like, la, 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 I don't want to hear about it. And it looks like it's all fine and dandy, right? They've done that. Anxiety shot that old sense of self back there. She's trying to create her new one. And Joy and the other original team of emotions are on their way to retrieve it because they believe that the sense of self they've created is the best one. The reason that this is important is because anxiety's doing her thing. We just talked about that. She's creating chaos because she's trying to protect Riley. All the other ones are going to find this old sense of self. Anxiety's sense of self is being built on anxiety memories. And that sense of self we hear in the film, its message is, I'm not good enough. The one that Joy and them are trying to retrieve, the message is, I am good enough. So, what we learn through this is that Joy and them get to the back of the brain where all these repressed memories are hanging out, essentially all of the ones that Joy has deemed bad or things that she wants Riley to be able to forget. But in order to get back to headquarters in time, they have to blow up the dam that is holding all of those repressed memories in. What I would call that dynamite is therapy. Now, they're not showing this in the film, but they're beautifully describing why that method doesn't work, why we can't take these quote-unquote bad memories and just shove them to the back of our brain and go on with our life. They will come out whether we want them to or not, and in this case, they're all triggered at once. But the beautiful thing about this is that as Joy and the other original emotions ride the wave of repressed memories back to headquarters, they find themselves in that pond. Remember how I said that they'll take the memories of the day that they want to help form her sense of self, and they go down an elevator and they roll them into this pond? Well, all of the repressed memories find their way into this pond. And a beautiful thing happens where we have the joy memories, we have the anxiety memories, we have the embarrassing memories, we have the envious memories, we have all of our emotions. They're all different colors, sad memories. They all start creating those ribbons. And Joy immediately wants to pull them out of the pond, but she realizes it's an effort in futility. There's thousands and thousands of them just rolling into this pond. She needs to get back up to headquarters to stop anxiety. This is around the same time where Riley is having a panic attack, okay? Just for timeline. When she gets back up to headquarters, you see the sense of self change. Remember, it turns into that beautiful tree. We see that this tree morphs into something that is green, one that is white, one that is blue, all showing the colors of the different emotions. One, like the embarrassment one is pink. It's like, oh, I can't believe I walked into that sliding glass door. One is green. I wish I had what she had, or I'm not as good as she is, right? I'm not good enough. I am good enough. I'm a good friend. Sometimes I'm a terrible friend. And it switches between all these different trees. And what we realize in that moment, or I hope people realize in that moment, is that we cannot pick and choose which memories we want to have be part of our life, because they are our memories. And we can't put them in the vault. We can't relegate them to the back of our brain, because either way, our sense of self isn't correct. It's not so fixed, right? There are parts of me that I don't like and parts of me that I do. But the lesson of the entire movie is that we feel our best when we accept all of those parts. When we don't deem some bad and some good and some okay and some not. There's too many facets to who we are. And we have to accept each and every part of that. I really just loved that message. And I just hope it's one that I can accept and absorb, and that you can accept and absorb, because there are always going to be things that we've done, memories that we have that we wish we didn't. There's things that probably happened to us that we wish we could just erase from our mind altogether. But until we come to terms with all the different parts of ourselves, good, bad, ugly, we aren't going to be able to feel okay. We can't just have anxiety running the show. We can't just have joy running the show. We have to be able to accept the different pieces of ourselves and know that we feel best and work best when we're all working together. And it kind of reminded me of like parts work. Like we have the different pieces of ourselves, and self-acceptance is the only way towards healing. And I just thought that was just a beautiful message. And I love that the tree changed shapes at the end. And it really just reminds us that we can't be in control all the time. We can't say that one thing's good or bad. Judgment doesn't really help us. It's more about acceptance. I know therapeutically that the only way for us to heal and to move forward as the best version of ourselves is to accept all the parts. We cannot take one and throw out the rest. We have to be able to accept where we've been, where we are, and have a hope for the future. And all of that comes together in this film, and it's just really beautiful. There was so much that I loved about Inside Out 2 that I want to share a couple other tidbits of things that I think not only represent emotional development and show it in a really cool way, but also could be maybe Easter eggs for future Inside Out or Inside Out whatever films. And the first is when Joy is taking the memories down in that elevator, because she's going to place them in that pond to help continually create Riley's sense of self. She's getting in, and she mentions to Sadness, she's like, "Hey, Sadness, you haven't been down there before. Do you want to see it?" And Sadness is scared. She shows a little fear, which is interesting. And she says, "No, I don't want to do that. You know how I can ruin things." And Joy says, "Sadness, anywhere I go, you go." And I thought that was really beautiful. We learned a little bit about this in the first film when Sadness touched other joyful memories. And we realized that was the fact that Riley missed those people. And it reminded me of the time when my dad passed away and I was really sad. I was grieving. And someone in my grief group had said something to the effect of like, grief shows us that there was love there was joy there. And I think so often we assume these emotions are completely different from one another, but they're also very closely linked. Joy and sadness can go together. And I thought that was just really beautiful. And off of that, another thing that I loved is the way that each of the emotion characters showed or expressed an emotion that they don't represent. For example, we see Joy experience sadness. We also see her experience frustration when things just aren't working out. We see anger experience regret. And then also, as we saw anxiety, crying, laying on the floor, we see anxiety experience guilt. So I didn't mean to hurt her. I was there to protect her. And I thought that was just really powerful because it shows that our emotions don't happen in a vacuum. They don't only happen on their own. They're very dynamic. And if you've ever tried to track your emotions, you can see how one leads to another, to another, to another, and it can almost change as we allow ourselves to feel it. And I thought that was just a really beautiful representation of that. Another thing that I found so interesting was how the emotions interacted with one another. A very key representation of this is when embarrassment hides sadness. She has snuck back into headquarters, and embarrassment piles up these notebooks and binders to hide her. And I thought it was really interesting the way that they worked together in certain ways, and some liked to talk to each other more, like anxiety liked to talk to envy, but didn't want to talk to joy, for example. And I just thought there was a lot left there to be developed, to talk about the way that one emotion can override another, or one can actually hide something else. Like I've talked a lot in the past about how anger in particular can hide hurt. And in this case, embarrassment hid sadness. I thought that was really beautiful. The last two little things I want to mention is, the first is kind of sad, and it's when Joy has this realization that as we get older, she says, maybe when we get older, it's harder for us to feel joy. maybe it's something we have to try harder for. And I thought that was just a really powerful message. And unfortunately, I kind of think it's true. I wish it wasn't, but I thought that was a really important thing for us to, as adults, to recognize and see if maybe this week we can seek out more joy in our life. And the final thing that I think is kind of an Easter egg, or something that hopefully they will talk about in another film, is the fact at the end when they cut to the mom's control center or headquarters, sadness is running it. And when they cut to her dad's, anger is in charge. And I thought, ooh, that is deep, that is heavy, and that is something that I hope they, dig into and work out in another film. And if Pixar, and even Pixar's listening, Disney Pixar, I would love to be the voice of a character of another Inside Out film. That would be a dream come true. That would just be amazing, make my whole life. But I would love to hear from all of you. Were there any other tidbits or things that you wish I would talk about? I'm happy to do another video on this. Clearly, I love the film. Did you have any other thoughts or key moments that really resonated with you? Leave it in the comments. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.